Hello everyone and welcome to Pick a Disc. I'm your host Matt Latham and this is the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And the guest today is Baz Greenland from several different podcasts on the We Made This Podcast network, talking about Black Holes and Revelations by Muse. And you know, as usual, we talk about all the usual stuff we talk about in every single episode. Yeah, we're 89 episodes deep into this, you should know it by now. If not, go and listen to some of the old ones and then come back and listen to this. Yeah, that's self-promotion for you. And I think that's it. In terms of other self-promotion, it's just for me to say follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, or subscribe. So yeah, you can follow us on socials under Pick a Disc. It's probably, mainly, possibly, could be, is this podcast. And if you're not subscribed and listen to this somewhere, then feel free to subscribe and listen to future episodes and go and check the back catalogue of stuff. And I think with that, I've got no other messages to mention. So yeah, let's talk to Baz. Leading into perhaps a bit of a science fiction theme, or leading to a bit later when we talk about the album in question. My guest, Baz. How you doing, Baz?
I'm good, yeah. Looking forward to be on chatting about this, yeah.
Yeah. Whose main podcast is a Doctor Who podcast, and you've been a bit busy the last couple of days. The last couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Life's been pretty hectic, but yeah, I'll always find time to chat about Muse. I love Muse so much. It's my favourite band of all time.
Yeah. And with a bit of the elements of the science fiction that we're going to talk about Muse as well. But yeah, so if we beating around the bush, Baz, why don't you just tell the lovely listeners the album that you've picked for us today?
So I have picked Muse's, I believe it's their fourth album. It's Black Holes and Revelations, which is a stonkingly good album. It's I think for Muse are my favourite band of all time, and I think this is just them absolutely top of the game. So many great tracks. So yeah, love this album. I think of all the ones, there were so many I could have picked from, but I thought this is the one that's probably most exciting to talk about.
Okay, so and that's why you want to talk about it. So it's just is it your favourite album of all time, or is it one of? Or?
It's one of mine. I say. And we'll talk a bit more about my Muse fan, I'm sure in a bit. But I love Muse. I have every single Muse album. Muse is probably one of the only artists where every single time an album comes out, I'm buying the album. I love them. I love all the music, and there's very few tracks where I don't particularly enjoy. There's so many great pieces from them, and but this album in particular, is probably the most fun to listen to as well. There are a few albums I could have chosen. Particularly things like Oranges and Symmetry is another great album, but it probably has my favourite track that Muse have done. But this one has some really big epic numbers, and I think this is Muse when they're most fun, the most epic, the most dramatic, the most funky, the most political. Yeah, it's got everything in there that Muse do really well, kind of summed into one album.
Right. So this is like, I'm trying to think of an example to. It's basically, if you wanted to show people what Muse are capable of on a wide spectrum, you'd show them this album.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's a natural entry point for people to introduce to Muse. Okay.
I think definitely, yeah. I think there are a few options, but I think this one is, so entertaining, so great. It's fun to listen to. And I think, it shows Muse at their absolute best.
So, how did you first discover Muse? Can you remember the first time you ever listened to them, or? Yeah,
so quite early on, a friend of mine from uni who actually came from Torquay, which is where Muse, the guys originally originated down that part of the world, and so he was a fan from the very beginning, from their first album, which obviously, and then I got into them with the second album, Origins and Symmetry, and he used to play this album a lot, and it was the first time I heard Newborn, I was like, wow, this is something else. And I think up to that point, I was very much, I've always been a bit of like a rock and indie, and particularly in the 90s, I grew up with a Oasis and Pulp and Blur and Seahorses and The Verve and like, all stuff I really liked. And Manic Street Preachers were my favourite. I really into Manic Street Preachers. And then Muse came along and I heard Newborn and Bliss and Plug-in Baby. And I was like, wow, this is something another level. I mean, Matt Bellamy's voice is so, so good. It's a phenomenal voice, phenomenal lead vocals and across all the albums. And when I heard Newborn, I was like, this is something else. And Newborn is still, to this day, one of my favourite songs of all time. Yeah, I almost picked Origins of Symmetry purely for Newborn alone. And so that was me at uni back in 2001, I think, is when I first started listening to them. And I've been a big fan ever since. In fact, my friend, for my birthday, he was a bit of a cheapskate. I bought the album and I cracked the CD cover. So for my birthday, he bought himself a new version of the album on CD and gave me the cracked version to keep. So which technically, I don't have many CDs left. You know, a lot of it's online music these days. I've got a lot of stuff on iTunes, but I have most of my Muse albums still. The ones that I was until I started going purely into digital. And I've still got that cracked version of Origins of Symmetry on my shelf now. And so I'm going to play that.
So you look at that crack. So you look at the crack in the case, and you got the memory tied to it. Yeah,
I've listened to it over and over again for that first time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see people online who talk about, you lose something with digital music, and sometimes I sometimes just like let that wash over me and say there's nothing wrong with digital music, but sometimes there is kind of like an element of like sentimentality and kind of stuff that you still get from physical stuff. I mean, unlike like gig tickets, really. I mean, gig tickets are mainly all email stuff, and I just can't be asked printing them out. And it's very rare you get something in the post now. But I quite like the idea that you got the cracked disc. So, Origin of Symmetry was the first album of theirs that you heard then.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that was before this came out. So was you waiting for this one to come out, or this come out already? Or?
So no, I was actually listening to Muse before Black Holes and Revelations came out. So they had Absolution as well. So that came out in February 2001. So it must have been pretty early on. I think it was that summer of 2001. I remember listening to that in the first house that we shared at uni. We went with my friend who got me into Muse. So it was Origin of Symmetry first. I still got that. Then it was Absolution, which came out in 2003. So that's the year I graduated from uni. And then, Black Hole Revelations. I mean, that was slightly late. That was in 2005. So this was a couple of years after university, not long before my son Ben, my high school co-host, came along. So it's predates Ben. And and I remember when this album came, there was a lot of buzz around this album when it came out, and the previous two albums, Absolution, Origins of Symmetry, were so big and so well received, and so many great, amazing tracks on those. And it was like, how are they going to keep the momentum? And I think the thing about Black Hole Revelations is that it was doing that kind of the epic and those intense vocals from Bellamy and the amazing work on guitar and drums and all that stuff as well that you do so well. But it suddenly took on another dimension. You got some kind of funky tracks there as well, and things that are a bit more playful. So I think Origin of Symmetry and Absolution can be almost a little bit serious at times, very, very intense, and this one's a little bit more fun, which I think is probably maybe a little bit more accessible. So when this came along, I remember listening to the album for the first time. I think this was the first one I bought on release. I think I got Absolution or Symmetry, say a little bit after they come out, but I was a Muse fan by the time Absolution came out. But I remember with Black Holes and Revelations, I got the album the day it came out, and I remember playing and thinking, this is fantastic. I think I'd heard Supermassive Black Hole at that point, which is another one of my absolute favourites, so I'm sure we'll talk about that. But it's it was I got that on the day of release, and since then I've got every album I've either been buying on CD or getting a download. I've been getting it on the day of release, and there was a new album this year coming out in August. So I'm my money's there ready to click download as soon as the album comes out.
You might have just got a standing order to Matt Bellamy on you.
Pretty much, yeah. I've even got the song they did for one of the Twilight movies. It isn't a great song. I mean, it's all right actually. There's some bits in it I like because it's Muse, but it's By the way, I even downloaded a song from the Twilight soundtrack because Muse were on it. It's not what I listen to as much, I'll admit, but if I sometimes because it's only because I stick on a Muse playlist and that'll probably be in there as well. So I've got everything. I'm still waiting for them to do their Bond song though. That's a whole other story. But when a Muse going to do the Bond song. They absolutely have to do that at some point in the future.
Okay, so before we talk about the album a bit more in detail, in terms of my history with Muse, say they're a band that I'm aware of and know of. I can remember my first real song of theirs. I remember, or the earliest one I can recall was "Time Was Running Out," because I think that used to be played a lot when I was listening to Radio 1. Back in the days, I think it was in 2003, I think.
Yeah, that's Delusion in 2003, yeah.
Yeah, so I just finished year 12. Yeah, so first year of sixth form. And I think throughout the start of my last year of secondary school, the promotion for Absolution was pretty much in full swing. But the only song I remember is "Time Is Running Out," but that was played all the time on Radio 1. But never really got into the album. I think it was a bit later on, I think, when Black Holes and Revelations came out. I think I either bought it off iTunes, I think, back in the day where I willingly gave money to Apple. I think I bought Black Holes and Revelations and listened to it quite a bit, but I didn't really follow any other albums after that. And Muse, I say, they're a band I don't dislike, a band I like, but I don't really follow that much. And they wouldn't be the first band I think of when I say what kind of music I like. Because it's not a lot of music I quite like, but there's something about, I think particularly this album, that I've always been drawn to. So when you chose this one, I was like, oh yeah, I can probably talk a bit about this one. But yeah, so Black Holes and Revelations itself as an album, it's kind of like a mixture between like progressive rock with almost like not exactly. It feels like it should be a concept album, but I don't think it is. It's just got a lot of, and by concept album I mean it feels like it should have like a narrative. It feels like it should have a narrative, but it really doesn't. It's just got a lot of kind of almost like fictional kind of like trappings in it, in terms of it feels like very science fiction-y. It feels quite
very much so,
out of this world. It's got a very out of this world feel to it, but the songs are covering very kind of like things we were dealing with at the time, as well as things that are happening, but are quite relevant to today, I think. So what do you think? So what do you think was it? What do you think the science fiction elements? Again, you're a massive science fiction.
Yeah.
We'll say
I'm a geek. I'm a sci-fi geek. Yeah.
Yeah. We're all sci-fi geeks. Do you think the science fiction elements attracted you to Muse initially, or because a lot of this kind of effects and kind of like my synthy sounds in this, were they apparent in earlier Muse work, or is this
a little bit? I think more so with this album. I think it's really carried on the use of the synth sounds in this album, and the political elements as well really get upped to another level in some of the other albums. And I think they almost become a bit more concept. There's a much more of a political narrative running through some of the other albums. Absolutely, I think this one is kind of not quite there, but it's got bits of it. I don't know, because I would say, when you look at Plug-in Baby and Bliss and obviously Newborn from Orange and Symmetry, and then Time of Running Out, you mentioned that one. There's Stockholm Syndrome, Hysteria. These are some of the big songs from the second album as well. Well, actually, the second I listened to is obviously an album previously with, I think the name of the first album is Caves I Love on that song, but it's one I don't listen to as much, the first album actually. But, I think there's a little bit more of a narrative and a bit more use of synth and stuff, but I don't think this was really apparent in the early stuff. I think it's probably why I like this album much, because it kind of sparked that maybe sci-fi geek in me when it brought in those elements, and even the music videos in this. If you look at the music video for Night Sidonia, it's absolutely bonkers, but it's fantastic. It's a proper sci-fi western thing going on in that final song, which I love. But it's I think it does start to indulge in those sci-fi trappings. But every album I say is a little bit different. This is a bit more sci-fi. Then you get a bit more political. But then you've got stuff like in Resistance, the opening song Resistance is pretty much riffing the Doc 2 theme. So in there, so they do have their elements later on. And then you get songs like Second Law, when you've got Supremacy, which is basically a Bond song. So even down to that guitar at the end, which I absolutely adore. And it's basically the audition piece for a Bond song I think they ever did. So they do play around a bit. You know, they've got proper symphonies, and you have staggeringly good symphonies. The Exogenesis Symphony from Resistance is phenomenal piece of music. It's a 3-track piece of music, which is pretty much mostly instrumental with Bellamy's haunting vocals on there. So I think they play around a lot of time. And I think they use more of the synth, they use more of the political trappings in later albums. But I think this is where it kind of really started from. So it's probably why it attracted me most to this album, but I don't think it was necessarily something that drew me to Muse themselves. I think just generally it was a really good use of rock and stonkingly good vocals. I think was what drew me in the first place, and which still draws me to them now.
Okay. So the and a lot of themes as well. So themes that run through it include stuff like political corruption, invasion, revolution, New World Order conspiracies. So there's a lot of kind of like not otherworldly, but kind of out of normal kind of like ideas where things that might be manipulating manipulating the normal working man / like the normal human being that's just like working normally, and like, there's like different people controlling them, which I think is the revelations part of the kind of revelations part of things. And the Black Holes covers the kind of almost science fiction spacey kind of trap rock. One thing that I noticed when I was listening to it again, because it was probably the first time I listened to this album in years, probably at least a decade since I last listened to this. When I listened to the War of the Worlds album from Jeff Lynne, there's a very kind of like 70s prog rock influence in this, but they kind of have taken that kind of genre and try to keep it modern. So a lot of the kind of pioneering synths that Jeff Lynne has did in the War of the Worlds one, they kind of, I think with the advent of technology and kind of recording techniques, this feels a lot cleaner and kind of perhaps something along the lines that if the technology was there in the 70s, that people would probably be doing things like this then. That makes sense.
Oh, quite possibly. I mean, Muse aren't afraid to do that. They aren't afraid to kind of draw on kind of classic time periods and themes and ideas and styles and bring it into. I mean, they do it in Simulation Theory. It's pretty much an 80s rock album, which I like, 80s rock pop. And I love it. There's a lot of synth pop in that one as well. Now, one of my favourites actually for that reason. But I think they definitely draw upon that kind of the 70s prog rock element certainly a lot in this album. But they bring it with their own style. So I agree on that.
Yeah. One thing that I've noticed as well is so all tracks are written by Matt Bellamy. So in terms of the creative path, the creative what's the word I'm looking for? I forgot what the word I'm saying. Basically, when Muse write tracks, is it pretty much all Matt Bellamy that does all the everything, or is it?
I think so. I think it's very much, even though they're all there in the publicity, I think Matt Bellamy is very much a frontman in many, many ways. And I think he's very much the guy who seems like the mind behind everything. And I think a lot of the vocals are written by him as well. Certainly, draws into his very left political leanings as well, which is fantastic as well. So, you don't need, and you're right, there's a lot of stuff in here with political messages as well, like overthrowing corruption, political leaders, and rising up again, which again you see later. Those kind of lyrics play out in other songs as well. But I think it's very much Matt Bellamy as a driving force behind the narratives of these songs.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I as you're talking, I just started checking. You know what? I couldn't name a other single member of Muse. I didn't even know how many members of the band there were. And I'm quite surprised in that the band history's very boring in comparison to other bands, because like it's pretty much just 3 members and and no one's left or for that. So Matt Bellamy's like the lead vocals, guitars, keyboards, synthesizers, piano, and there's Dominic Howard who's percussions, and Chris Wolstenholme who's bass guitar, backing vocals, and occasional keyboards and guitar, as well as several touring members. So it is pretty much the 3 of them. I always assumed there's at least 6 or 7 members of them.
And I think that's probably because they're constantly reinventing themselves. They're still very much that Muse style, the vocals, the rock, the there's still a lot of stuff they do which feel identifiable Muse, but they shake it up. I think, which is why probably, particularly after Black Holes, some albums a bit more Marmite, because you either love what they're doing with the concept or you think this is going far from what they've done before and you're not particularly a fan. I think, and there are albums that I think the couple albums that followed after this one were probably some of their weaker ones. I think, though you have some amazing tracks on them, but I love the fact that Muse are constantly reinventing themselves and doing something new. And what I've heard of the new album this year, there's one song actually I'm not particularly a fan of. I've heard already, but I'm so good by the album. I love what they do, and they do so many different things all the time. And but they're constantly reinventing and come up with a new message or a new idea, or they don't get stale. And I think when you've got the same band members year after year, I mean they've been going on since the end of the 90s. So, or certainly in terms of actually getting stuff released. So you would expect them to be a bit more samey by this point, the amount of albums they've churned out, and they aren't, and that's what I like about them.
Yeah, so I'm just having a quick look at the producer for this album. I think Muse are down as producers as well, so I don't know if it was majority was self-produced, but the other producer is a guy called Rick Costy. Rich Costy. I'm talking about someone completely different. I don't know who Rick Costley is, but there's also a guy called Rich Costy who is the producer of this. I was having a quick look at his credits, and I think he's down for a producer and mixing guitar and percussion for the latest Frank Turner album, FTHC. Which he's producer of that, and it's probably one of the first Frank Turner albums in years I've been quite excited about. But some of the other stuff, I'm quite surprised of how much he's been involved in some of the stuff I really quite like. So he's got credit for mixing on the Pale Waves Who My album, which was one of my favourite albums of last year. He was a producer for the Angel and Airways Lifeforms album, which I've not listened to. The only reason I bring that up is because it's Tom DeLonge after he went a bit bonkers. Yeah, there's Seagulls Out in Your Head. He was mixing for that. He mixed The Great 2009. He's been a producer on Sam Fender Type Sonic Missiles, Wombat's Beautiful People Ruin Your Life mixing, Wonderful Wonder Boy The Killers, Blondie, At the Drive-In, Bastille, Biffy Clyro, Carly Rae Jepsen, Death Cab for Cutie. He was actually producer engineer for Kintsugi, from their 2015 album. Just loads of stuff. Also did mixing on Church's Bands What You Believe as well. So Waves. Yeah, he's also producer on Take That Heart by Frank Turner as well. So so he's basically been involved in quite a lot of stuff I quite like.
Very prolific producer, yeah.
Yeah. So and interestingly enough, very different sounding albums. So he's not. So he's managed to kind of mix up the kind of sounds that he's got. Whereas like some producers, you just listen to, I can tell it's him or them or whatever. So and I think with the songs as a whole as well, one thing that I often get with Muse is that they are very much built for like arenas and anthems. They're very much epic operas, like kind of epic. They're the kind of, they feel like the big screen or movie version of kind of rock bands. So so you got this.
You have to play them at full blast. Yeah, you can't play them quietly.
But their sound, like the soundscape and the sense, they just feel like they're built for kind of epicness. Where so when you can kind of see, you can kind of just feel it, like just travelling around a massive wide space. Which I think it's to its credit.
I've heard of Muse concerts can be described as disappointing because the world doesn't end. It's disappointing. That's the scale they go with. They go in I mean, the songs, the lyrics, the vocals, the instruments, everything is so epic at times. I was making some even though I know the Black Holes Revelations backwards, and I know the songs I've played many, many times, I was still making some notes for this podcast, and I was writing epic on half of them, because they are just big, stonking, huge tracks. And you get it in every album, and that's why you get everything from the Newborn to this to Time Is Running Out. You can imagine these are going to fill stadiums, and they're going to be amazing. They're going to be big.
Yeah, but the word operatic gets thrown about quite a lot. And I think a lot of that as well is kind of Bellamy's vocals.
Yes.
And I think his voice is a bit too good for the kind of bands that I listen to the majority of times. So yeah, I think that's what I think one of the things one of the reasons I probably don't listen to the Muse as much is that I think Matt Bellamy can sing pretty much properly. It's not punk enough.
Well, he's got amazing range. I mean, I've actually heard that his vocal cords, they've actually changed their kind of they're more like female vocal cords now, because of the falsetto that he hits is amazing in so many songs, and have actually changed his vocal cords. But he can do really low stuff as well. There's a song called The Void on the last album he did, and he goes so low, and you think the guy who can hit those intense falsettos should not be able to also sing at that low range, and he does it both. That again, that's what I'm saying. So I think that's one of the reasons I like Muse so much, because I think Matt Bellamy is such an amazing singer, because he can get these falsettos, and you can't believe it's coming out of his mouth, and then at the same time he'll hit these really interesting lows as well, which are the complete opposite. So he fills the void, or he fills the space that these songs create as well. And I think they wouldn't be as epic, even though, say, the work on the drums and guitar and that, they're amazing, and the synth and the keyboard and stuff, they're fun, they're big, there's some amazing guitar riffs. There's a couple of the songs we're going to talk about, but I think if it wasn't for, I think they're as epic as they are because of the vocal that goes with those.
Yeah, and I think he said it's here. I think his voice can carry those songs, and I think it's not. There's only a couple of times I think it is, but I think there's kind of like a lineage you can bring to Queen and almost Freddie Mercury in terms of a showmanship, but it's a very different kind of showmanship. I think because Freddie Mercury had a very kind of like almost operatic voice at times when he was able to, and he was able to kind of carry those songs. I mean, both the bands have got kind of a good band behind them, but the vocals can often carry a whole kind of arena. So when you kind of see Muse headline Glastonbury on BBC, or when you watch videos of Live Aid where Freddie Mercury's just like singing to Wembley Stadium, they've got very, very kind of like that kind of showman mentality. I think Matt Bellamy's a lot more a kind of more serious, darker side of what Freddie Mercury was doing, but they've both got a very kind of showmanship in very different ways. So I was kind of getting that from this at times.
Oh, definitely,
yeah. So, we're going to quickly move on to the tracks. So, which tracks did you want to bring up to talk about?
I won't call all of them. It's fine. I think briefly on Take About the opener, I think it's more of a mood piece, I think, for the album, but it's got those kind of politics, burn hell for your sins and rise against corruption, that kind of stuff. There's all that kind of that. It's a very, very political opener. It sets the piece. It's really haunting vocals from Bellamy and some great guitarists, but it's more of a mood piece. I think for the album, but I think the first ones that really stand out, I think, are the next ones, Starlight and Supermassive Black Hole, and they're the ones I kind of, to start with, I wanted to talk about.
But yeah, I think briefly on Take a Bear, while just quickly on it, there's a kind of like, it's a scene setting rather than kind of just bam out the gate, which quite a few of my favourite albums are very much bam out the gate albums, but this one kind of like settles you in and says, okay, calm down, you're sitting in, we want to take you on a journey here. And I quite like the build up to this, and quite a few times in this album actually, the album does a few things that I quite like and have praised. It's the Wolf Alice Model of His Cool thing again, where there's a way of being able to kind of build tension to songs and then pay off that tension. There's a couple of times where they do that. A lot of the times they kind of do that with just with the drive and layering stuff on, but there's a couple of times where they'll start slow and then build into stuff. There's at least one track on this album, another track on this album that's like that very much, but this one kind of builds you in, getting ready to kind of like kick you in with Starlight, and I think he does quite a good job in setting that up, particularly if you're listening to this as an album rather than just kind of like as a random playlist.
I think that's it, and I think that's one thing I was listening to yesterday as full volume as I could get away with my house with the rest of my kids doing vision in the other room, so I couldn't go too loud. But try just listen to the album and as one piece, and it's a great scene setter. It really sets up the stage. It's not Take a Bow isn't one that would ever be released as a single. It wouldn't really go anywhere, particularly the screeching ending as well. I think, but it's But yeah, it's a great scene today. It's got the kind of the political dialogue in the lyrics. It's got that, it's amazing synth and rock there, and some really haunting vocals. It sets everything up in a really kind of grand epic fashion.
Yeah, and I think carrying on from the song you mentioned talk about before, let's talk about Starlight, which I love that song. I think it's great.
It's great. It's probably the most mainstream song, if you could say everything on mainstream Muse on the album. I think it's a bit more of an anthem one, but it's it's fun and it's big, and I love it too. Yeah,
it's that kind of like bass kind of like riff, or if it's not a bass riff, it's the low guitar that goes dun 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 dun. That like just gets in and just drives it through and kind of carries through, and you're never bored of the song.
No.
It's and it's got that kind of like almost kind of driving rock song, but again, Matt Bellamy's vocals of the chorus kind of slow it down and kind of like has this nice contrast with. I mean, it's not a fast song. I'm not sure what the BPM are, but it's not a fast song. But it feels like he's singing like at half the speed of the music, and it works it just seems to work.
It's one you just sing along to it. It's great. It's not the strongest song on the album for me, but it's probably more I say what is mainstream, probably more accessible to a wider audience. I'd say it's a bit more.
It's a single,
slightly more. Yeah, it was a single as well, but it wasn't the best selling single of the album as well. But it's certainly much more accessible, more fun, and a bit slightly lighter as well in the kind of tone of it.
Yeah, the lyrics are a lot more optimistic as well. So it's rather than talking about it's not talking about the Illuminati or like the end of the world or anything. Yeah. It's actually just it's practically a love song. Yeah, but it's also the one that throws in the chorus with the Black Holes and Revelations comes from this song. So particularly when you have an album and you get to the point where, quite early on actually, where the title of the album is thrown in as a song lyric. The term black hole being in space is something that will just take matter and consume it to nothingness. It's like the end. It's like the most ends that anything can end. Yeah. Yeah. So like nothing could survive that, unless you're a dwarf character, but, but I think I quite like the metaphor saying that, like, if once, so like a metaphor of black hole taking stuff that once it's in, it's gone. It's gone. And there's like a kind of, and the song is talking about, the rest of the song is talking about being away from someone you care about. Yeah. And that time is gone. So the time away is kind of fleeting and going, and the time spent apart, once that's gone, you can't get that time back. Yeah. And that's lost time for people that you care about and stuff. And I quite like how they managed to fit that in, that kind of like relationship, or that metaphor for that in with the kind of space theme.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's nice. I mean, Muse don't just do epic drama political songs. They do love songs. Madness is pretty much a kind of a sort of a love song, and another album I love. But it's I think this and Invincible are both kind of more about relationships, or kind of, I mean, maybe more mainstream. It's a bit more standard, typical kind of, not quite poppy, but kind of more accessible to a more of a mainstream audience. I think with those lyrics too. Yeah,
and I think and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think there's according to Genius, in some live concerts, Matt Bellamy changes the lines to Trials and Tribulations rather than Black Holes and Revelations. So I'm not too sure about that, if I'm honest. But okay, so which song did you want to go on to?
We've got to talk about Supermassive Black Hole though.
Yeah,
it's. I mean, I say, you think Starlight picks it up, and then Supermassive Black Hole comes in with this stonkingly good tune. It's one of my favourite songs of all time, and I love when Muse go funky. I'm a big Jamiroquai fan, So I quite like a bit of funk as well. And I know, it's not quite that level, but it's some Muse songs are funky, I would say, later on. But I love it when they go down that route. And yeah, it's great. The vocals and, his falsetto in this is astounding. It's really great.
Yeah, it's also their first single as well. So there's very much a single quality to it, but it's a very different. You can tell it's the same band, but it's also quite different.
Yeah.
To Starlight as well.
And I think this did better as well than Starlight in terms of release.
Yeah, I think so.
It was number 4 in the charts, I think, whereas Starlight was 13. Yeah, so it is the best. Of the 5 albums they released, it did the best. It was the only one to get in top 10 actually. Well, Night Sidonia was a number 10. So yeah.
Okay.
Well.
So is this still the highest charting song then?
It might be. I think Muse have never been mainstream enough to get that number 1. I can't think of a Muse number 1. But I think this is definitely one of the best. Can you
argue that they're not mainstream if they are headlining, if they're capable of headlining Glass?
I don't know. I don't know because I don't listen to the number. I don't particularly listen to the modern pop charts anyway. Stuff like on charts. So I don't know. I think Muse are one of those exceptions. I tend to listen to my music is 90s indie. I listen to Oasis and Pulp, and I listen to David Bowie and Queen and Pink Floyd and Moody Blues. That's where I am at. So I'm probably not. I listen to some Biffy Clyro and some Imagine Dragons. Probably not the most coolest bands, but stuff I like to listen to. But Muse is probably the only really modern act that I will continuously listen to. So I say that with caveat that I'm probably not the best person in terms of what's the best modern music. You tell me what the best albums of last year go. Did Muse release an album? I don't know. So I'm probably not the best person to argue that point.
Okay, yeah, so Baz's new website, didmusereleaseanalbum.com. So if you click on it, it's just the word saying no. So it's one of those things, like one of those sites where you just go on, it's either yes or no. But I think particularly with Supermassive Black Hole as well, is that again, funky is the best word. I mean, I wouldn't have used funky for to describe it until you mentioned it, but it's it's the right bit, I think. And it's the kind of like the supermassive black hole. Yeah, it's just like very kind of like cool. So it kind of like drives in with kind of like the operatic, and then comes in with supermassive hole. They haven't hit you with the bombastic. They haven't hit you with the bombastic harder stuff yet. So you're still kind of building up at this point in the album. So where else in the album do you want to go? If you want to...
Where'd you go? Very briefly. And I'm trying to do this in order, but Map of the Problematique is just a really, really great song. It's a real epic one with some really kind of haunting vocals again. But it's not one that you can kind of. I find it hard to describe. Map of the Problematique. It's no one that was. I'm surprised it was released as a single because actually, and it probably didn't do as well because it got to number 18. So, but it's just an epic track with some amazing guitar riffs, some really haunting vocals. It's epic as I would describe, but I'm not sure I can really describe more than that.
Okay. So I think with this, I was more quite interested in the kind of the reasoning of the name and the story behind the name of what the Map of the Problematique is.
Yeah.
And the title's a reference to a book called Limits to Growth, which was written in 1972. And the Club of Rome think tank would create a quote-unquote map of the problematique, detailing the global problematique, which is a set of likely challenges the world might face in the near future. And this Limits to Growth book correctly predicted the economic crash in 2008. So, I might just quick look. Almost, if anyone goes back and reads that book and it mentions something about a bat causing worldwide if someone goes to that book and then someone reads a passage which says, "Oh yeah, just beware of bats in 2020," then that book's going to be really quite scary.
Yeah. But it's epic, and it's got a political lean as well. But it's a great piece of music. That one, but it's it's one I really enjoy, but it's what I really enjoy when I listen to it. When I think of what the best songs of the album, the ones that stand out the most, it's probably not one of the most standout ones, but for me, it's like it really resonates with me every time I listen to it.
Okay, so where else do you want to move on to next?
Oh, let's do Assassin with its Knight Rider riff. I love it. It's like a souped up Knight Rider theme tune. It's epic and it's insane. It's another one that really, really stands out on the album. It's really, really fun. It's got big vocals, big guitar, big drums. You know, it's got great lines like "destroy demonocracy." Kind of like, you know, the way they play on this political stuff as well is great. But I would describe Assassin as insane, and I love it for that reason.
Yeah, and this is part where it's one of the where they kind of get heavier, or at least driving, and they just go with the more kind of rock side of the progressive stuff. Yeah. So so it feels like it's more of a kind of quote unquote typical rock song. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think at the time in the album sequence as well, it's after Invincible, which I'll probably bring up later on, and then just before Exopolitics, so it's a point where it's kind of worked up and kind of earned the kind of manic, the manicness that it does.
I think going back to Invincible, it's another great. It's almost like kind of that love song. Together we are invincible. It's great. It's about relationships again, but it's kind of got that. Again, it's got a stonking mix of guitar and drum beats. It's a great. It really builds and builds. So it starts with the March of the Booted Feet and just builds and builds and builds from this kind of almost quite poetic first half into this kind of big dramatic second half, which then leads very nicely into Assassin.
Yeah, I think with Invincible as well. Invincible, I thought surprised me in that I quite like that. I quite liked it because it's very slow. Kind of, it feels like it's a kind of like a ballad. Yeah, and a ballad because it's following on from the tone that's set by Soldier's Poem beforehand, which is kind of like a slower.
Which is it's the slowest song on the album. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's practically a kind of, in comparison to the other song length, Soldier's Poem is 2.5 minutes, so it's just like slow minutes of a really. It feels like it's a kind of extension. Or it's like an extension of the Muse set in Invincible. So when Invincible starts, it's a different song, but there's a build-up of tension, and you can kind of synth guitars. I'm not exactly sure what the instrument is, whether it's just because I've seen kind of footage of Muse playing live where it's a guitar, but the plate is like a touchscreen, like a touchscreen kind of like thing that will manipulate the signal being sent for the guitar and stuff. So I don't know whether it's that. I've got no idea who that is. If anyone listening knows what I'm talking about at all, please let me know, because I'm talking bollocks at the moment. I've got no idea what the hell I'm talking about in terms of musical instruments. But yeah, there's that kind of like sound that goes through it, and then it kind of slowly builds up with that tension that it's starting to kind of like been going through since like Soldier's Poem, and like kind of rewarding you to go through about like 5 minutes of this kind of slow introspective ballad, and then about 3 minutes 50 seconds in, then it kind of kicks in with the guitars, and then it just erupts, and stuff like that. I love in My Love Is Cool and Wolf Alice. If you listen to that episode when I talk about that kind of tension thing again, I brought it up twice now. That kind of tension is like resolved stuff, and it kind of it pays off. It kind of pays off your tension, and I really like when that song does that. And I quite like when songs do that. And it leads into kind of like Assassin, kind of Assassin, and a bit more energy in the second half of the album.
Definitely.
Where else do you want to go to next?
I mean, Exopolitics and City of Delusion. A good song. Exopolitics is very political. Great beat, great vocals there. I like City of Delusion because I love that kind of Spanish kind of Cuban vibe going on. It's you can almost imagine like a tango being danced to it. It's a very different flavour to it, but it's intense. I love that. Yeah, how are you describing that one? It's almost like distorted underwater synth. You've got in that bit there's a piece in City of Delusion, and mixed with the guitar riffs and the use of kind of brass instrument, I think it's trumpets as well. So it's got a lot of it's very, very different to the other part. It's another one I really love listening to because I think it's a nice change of pace when you've got the really intense Assassin after the build up from Invincible. City of Delusion is still big and it's epic and it's got a big drum beat, but it's and yeah, maybe a little bit of funk again as well, but that kind of Spanish vibe to it is something quite unexpected after the last couple of songs.
Yeah, I mean the trumpet and the brass suddenly threw me by surprise. I was like,
yeah,
wait. At one point, I mean, half paying attention to it this morning, I was like, have I accidentally just moved Spotify to a mariachi band at one point? But no, yeah, but it's quite a nice kind of like nice diversion, and again, kind of just keeps your interesting, so it doesn't seem like things are the same. So they're kind of like throwing new ideas in and new instruments to keep things. Will keep the listener on their feet and everything.
Yeah.
And I quite like the kind of idea of this, the line of going to the lyrics bit where it says the City of Delusion. So Genius is saying that the Genius annotation, from 4 contributors, so I can't credit whoever it is, the 4 people that kind of tweak this line. The line suggests societies which are stubbornly insistent on one belief system, refusing to consider truths that deviate from their prevailing narrative. To destroy this City of Delusion is to encourage Socratic questioning and critical thinking, i.e. to avoid blind faith. And that sounds like something that could have been written like last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it. The stuff that Muse sing about in these songs, yeah, it's so relevant today as well.
Yeah, but I quite like the idea that the City of Delusion is basically fake news or or what we refer to as the bubble online on the bubble and stuff. And yeah, I think people have. Yeah, as much as I think people are as much as they'll say they're always captured in a sort of bubble of belief systems or political beliefs or political leanings and stuff. And sometimes the kind of opposing view is not seen or you've not kind of looked into something further and stuff. And I quite like the idea of this City of Delusion, but then it goes into a kind of and the rest of the chorus goes and break these walls down, and like an idea of a city having walls is quite a historical thing rather than a futuristic thing. Considering Muse has this idea of futuristic kind of trapping of science fiction elements, going back having this kind of like almost traditional or classical, historical kind of like idea of city walls and stuff. It like brings back a kind of legacy and the idea of something that's been lasting for a long time, as well as the sounds that feel like it's a long time in the future.
Well, absolutely. I think there is this kind of flip back and forward time. I mean, going back to Soldier's poem, it's kind of almost got this kind of 50s dreamy motif running through it. So, something physically, sometimes with the actual, the instruments you're listening to, sometimes with the vocals and the ideas behind it, it is going back and forth time, looking at legacy, looking at kind of rise up and opening your eyes to what's really going on, but also looking at, this is something in the past as well and how we get to it. So, yeah. Totally.
Yeah, exactly. And I just quite like how that was kind of like, how that's put and stuff. Any other song you want to bring up before we move on?
Before Nights of Sidonia. There's only 2 left. There's Hoodoo, which is a really great symphonic piece. I think after probably Butterflies and Hurricanes from the last album, I love the very Western guitar riff, which feels like, again, a prelude to Nights of Sidonia. There's a thing in this album that it's setting up the later tracks. So it has that kind of almost a Western vibe to it and some really haunting vocals there. But yeah, Nights of Sidonia, the final track, is bonkers. And it's probably one of my favourite songs of all time as well. If there's one song I'd want to hear live, it'd be this song.
Yeah, I think my first kind of foray. It can't be because I'm inside the album. I remember this being on a Guitar Hero game that I got. I think it might be Guitar Hero 3. I think I'm going to fact check that because. Yes, yeah. Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock had Nights of Sidonia, and it had three extra downloadable contents for it, which was Exopolitics, Supermassive Black Hole, Stockholm Syndrome, which I didn't get. But yeah, Nights of Sidonia, I have played the Guitar Hero on this and have not been able to get past medium. I can't play it with 5 buttons.
Not surprised. Yeah. It's great. I mean, this is the one. We talk about the music videos so much, but the music video of this is insane too. This kind of very pulpy sci-fi western with kind of space cowboys and stuff and that. It's great, and it takes Hoodoo up to another level, and it's funky, it's epic, it's very tongue in cheek. but it builds and builds. That first half was Western, that wah 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 thing going with the Western as well, which I love in this album. So much fun. And then halfway through, it builds and builds and builds into this fantastic drum beat and synth, and that no one's going to take me alive. And I can't sing, so I'm not even going to try and replicate Matt Bellamy's kind of vocals, but it's again, the way it builds and builds to this huge bombastic climax. It's one that you absolutely have to listen to at full volume. And yeah, the guitar riff in that final part of that song is insanely good. I can see why no one's going to get to the higher level on Guitar Hero 3 with that, because it's one of the best guitars I think that Muse have done.
Yeah, and not that much in terms of the lyrics to it, actually. No. It's a lot more of the kind of repeated verse and the solos and just the soundscapes of it, and it kind of builds up the album to this kind of epic finale.
Yes,
which works really well. Works really well, and again, it's considering it's over 6 minutes. Possibly passes the Latham limit. For anyone listening, the Latham limit is the term that John Parable used for me moaning about songs that are over 5 minutes length. But
not Shiny Crazy. You're not a fan of Shiny Crazy Diamond, then? Pink Floyd. It's about 17 minutes long, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I probably never finished it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I love classical music, so I can listen to Beethoven's Fifth quite easily. So yeah.
Yeah,
that's my taste.
I think. Yeah, I'm not listening to the full version. I'm not listening to the full version of Shine On Crazy Diamond. I mustn't be if I've forgotten it was a Pink Floyd song. But no, but yeah, I think it carries itself quite low. Again, it works well to the kind of soundscape, and particularly in where it is listened to in comparison to the rest of the album. It's the climax. It's the kind of resolution of all kind of the sounds and kind of like journey that you've been onto the album, and it works so well as a closer.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and again, the "No One's Going to Take Me Alive" it kind of works, and I can probably imagine the crowd erupting and Matt Bellamy just stepping away from the mic and just listening to the crowd singing.
Yeah. As I said, it's like if I could hear one Muse song live on stage in a big stadium or big field, it would absolutely have to be Nuts, don't you? I imagine it's absolutely epic.
Mm-hmm. So, with the reception of Black Holes and Revelations, I've lost my flipping. Just bear me a second. I've just lost my. Okay, so Black Holes and Revelations was met with positive reviews from critics. Metacritic has given it an average of 75 out of 100 based on 32 reviews. And I'll come to what I think's lowered that score. So it's received top ratings from Observer Monthly, Q, E, and Alternative Press. Planet Sound listed it as the album of the year, and the album was placed third on the NME's Albums of the Year list in 2006, as well as being named as Q's second best album of the year. The album also received a Mercury Prize nomination and featured on the 2007 version of the book 1000 Albums You Must Listen to Before You Die, and the album was named as one of classic rock's 10 most essential progressive rock albums of the decade. In flip side, some critics called it overblown, including RTE's Bill Lahane, The Enemies' Anthony Thornton. Rolling Stone's Christian Hood also said that, and Hood also went on to describe the notes Sedonia and City of Delusion as ridiculous, but concluded it was surprising that the album worked. AV Club Noel Murray, on the other hand, gave the band credit for reworking themselves, but called the album a nightmare and gave it a D+. But that's not the worst one, because longer term listeners to the album now that I love dipping into the Pitchfork review, and the Pitchfork review of this, I was surprised at the Pitchfork review. So yeah, they kind of didn't like Taylor Swift's reputation and gave that 6 point something. They gave Mika's Life in Cartoon Motion a 1.5. They've given Black Holes and Revelation a 4.2.
Good then.
Yeah, which is and some of the stuff here is hilarious. This is from the Pitchfork review. What Muse lack in chop house showmanship on the prog side of the equation, they attempt to make up for in volume. Their song use full stack guitars and thunderous drums to evoke God's footsteps. It's the kind of deep fried, flash frozen crud that can be ridiculously fun to listen to. Oh, I love Pitchfork.
Oh, it's fantastic. But you know what? I can't agree with the volume comments and the fact that it's ridiculous, because I think the album is ridiculous, but I think it's ridiculous in a good way. It's the point in which Muse went from, really good rock albums and great vocals to it went up to another level, which I liked, but I can see why people went, what the hell am I listening to? Knights of Sidonia is bonkers. It is absolutely bonkers, and it's fun, but it's ridiculous, and it's very, very loud. And I can see why people who had kind of enjoyed things like Newborn and Bliss and Stockholm Syndrome, then going, what are they doing? They've gone off the deep end now. So I can get that. Actually, as much I think this is very fun, and I think it's quite accessible to a lot of people, I think I can also see why people who have listened to the first 3 albums have said they've kind of got their own arse a bit and gone just really experimental now. But I think it set the stage for what they've done ever since, and I think they every album feels slightly different, or every couple of albums feel slightly different. So I think it was a good thing. I think if we'd had another Absolution or Origins of Symmetry, I think Muse would have got a bit stale by now. So I think Black Holes came in, did something really different, is great. And I think, don't always hit it out of the mark, but I think this one does. But you get albums like this, things like the follow-up album, which is Resistance, I think is probably one of the weaker albums, though the Exogenesis 3-part ending is phenomenal. But I think it couldn't maintain this high. It did dip for a couple of albums and then came out strong. Like the last one I thought they did, the very 80s Simulation Theory, is another one of my favourites. But again, it's more experimental. So I think the fact that Black Hole was more experimental is a great thing. It's not for being stale, but I can see why people would have gone, what the hell am I listening to at the same time?
Yeah. And I'll close off with Pitchfork has a small paragraph on Knights of Sidonia, which again is hilarious. Brace yourself. If the album opens with its best camp, perhaps it's no mistake that it ends with its worst. Knights of Sidonia begs to be taken off on a stretcher and sprayed down with liquid Novocaine like a histrionic Italian midfielder.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant.
Oh man, I don't think I agree with you, but you have to give credit to Pitchfork. If you as much as you disagree, as much as you easily disagree with them, it is great. So in terms of the commercial success, the album went to number 1 in Australia, Austria, Belgium, the European Albums Chart, Ireland, Scotland, Switzerland, and the UK as a whole. Got to number 2 in Belgium, Holland, France. Got to 84 in Mexico. Got to 41 in Poland. End of year chart, it got to 26th. It was the 26th best-selling album in 2006. Overall in the UK, it was the 50th best-selling Dutch album, and again, it was 77th in Australia. In 2007, it got to 90 and 76 on 2 separate Belgium album measurements. I'm not exactly sure what they are. Ultra Top Flanders and Ultra Top Wallonia. I'm not sure what they are. So, if Babs from Over Underrated is listening, if you have any idea what they mean, please let me know. And it got to... Yeah, it carried on to chart in 2007, 8 and 9 in the UK, and 10 in the UK. Settling around the 140 to 160 mark. In terms of certifications, it sold a lot, and I just accidentally clicked on the Wikipedia article for certified units rather than clicking the sold button. So it sold 2 million in Europe, twice platinum. It sold I think this is quite an exact figure on Wikipedia, so I don't know when this was taken, but it's 1.119574 copies in the UK. So it went 3 times platinum, sold over 1 million in the US, 300,000 in France, 100,000 in Canada. So it's done really, really well. 100,000 in Japan. It's done well. So Matt Bellamy has probably brought another story to his house, I think. But
I'm sure he has, yeah.
Yeah. But, so that's the kind of like commercial performance. I mean, I bought it off iTunes. So I'm one of those 1.1 million.
I've technically got some of the album on iTunes as well as my CD, so I can put it in playlist as well. So I've bought some of the songs twice now.
That's a thought. I wonder how much. I wonder I wonder how many songs you'd have to buy separately on an album in iTunes or digitally for it to class as an album sale. I mean, if you liked all of them apart from, I don't know, Soldier's Poem, and you just bought them apart from one, I mean, it's a waste of money. It's cheaper to buy the whole thing, but I wonder if that classes an album. I wonder how that works.
Oh, is it the whole album? If you buy 5 songs, is that enough, or is it 8 songs? It's about 10 albums, isn't it? So I don't know.
So I wonder how much that. Note to self. I'm probably. I need to look into that, and I'll probably forget to. But future Matt, if you're listening to this while you're editing, if you haven't done that yet, go and have a look. Because at the very moment you are very intrigued, and I know what you're like. You will forget to do it. So I might leave this in because quite a few times in recording, I just refer to future Matt. Leave this in. Future Matt. Blah blah blah. Have you ever seen Muse live?
No, and I'm desperately want to see them. I'm in Cardiff, and they haven't done Cardiff in years. When the last time they did it, I think my kids were really young, and it wasn't possible. But they've been to Bristol a couple of times, and I'm hoping they are doing some tours this year, but it's not a main tour. I know they've got a new album, so maybe next year. I definitely want to see them. It's top of my bucket list for artists to see live. So not yet, but I'm hoping to one day.
Okay, I hope to see. I don't think I've not seen them live. I probably won't because again, tickets to them are probably too expensive for me to justify seeing them live. I've seen a couple of live sets or parts of live sets. I think I saw bits of one of their Glastonbury. The headline Glastonbury. I can't remember when it was, but I'm pretty sure if they didn't headline it, I remember seeing a set by them. And again, it probably doesn't do it justice, but they look like they can carry themselves. They feel like they are built to play massive venues, arena venues, and fill those crowds. And they just feel like in their elements. I know you've talked about other albums, as we've been talking in comparison to this one, but if people who are listening to and their first album is this album from Muse, which album would you recommend they go to next?
I would recommend Origins of Symmetry, their second album. It's got some amazing songs. They're a bit more focused. It's not quite as funky as this one, but I think there were some amazing tracks there. So Origins of Symmetry is their second album from 2001. I'd definitely recommend that.
Okay. I can't remember. I might have listened to that once.
It's the orange cover with the it's got newborn plug-in baby and an amazing cover of Feeling Good as well on there.
Okay. I've got memories of that Feeling Good cover, and I don't know why. Whether it might be somewhere else. So we move on to the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. So anyone who's not listened to us before, what this is, I'm going to ask Baz to pick one song from this album to be immortalised forever on the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. I can't veto the choice. Whatever Baz chooses goes, even if and there's nothing too long to to make me cry, so that's fine. So you will be following a street song. So
right, okay. So well, it'll be slightly different then. As tempted as I am to put Night Sidonia because it's big and it's bonkers, I think because you've really got to capture Matt Bellamy's vocals, it's my other favourite one. So I'm going to go with Supermassive Black Hole. Okay.
So you're going to pick Supermassive Black Hole. So why is that one? Why do you want to pick that one?
It's one of my favourite songs. I mean, that along with Night Sidonia are my two favourite songs in the album. I think it really captures Matt Bellamy's vocals fantastically. It's got some amazing work on there. It's very funky. It's got some really good edgy synth as well. It's pure Muse. It captures everything, but it's something particularly special as well. So yeah, that for me is my pick.
Okay. So, So Supermassive Black Hole becomes the latest song to join the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. And adding on to a stretch of songs featuring High Horse by Casey Musgraves, La Resistance on the South Park movie, and Don't Mug Yourself by The Streets. So yeah, it's quite an eclectic section, but looking ahead, we're getting to looking ahead to future episodes, which I'm not going to spoil here. Getting to an interesting part of the playlist, I think, in the next few episodes. It'll be interesting to see which songs get picked next, because yeah. But that's all I'm going to tease you with, listeners. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I'm just saying. Maybe it's just going to not be as interesting, and I'm just teasing you. But I don't know. The only way to find out is to listen to future episodes. Just self-promoting myself here. It's fine. So that's it, Baz. We're at the end of our conversation, and it's been great to chat to you about Muse. It's yeah, and I say I'm not listening to this album all the way through properly in about 10 years, so it was nice to kind of rediscover it, and just getting to points like, oh yeah, I remember some bits. I mean, yeah, some songs have always stuck in my head. So Starlight, it's never left my head. But then bits of it I've forgotten. I mean, I've forgotten Invincible. I've forgotten, Hoodoo and City Delusion and stuff. But, thank you so much for, bringing me back in. If people want to,
pleasure, yeah.
If people want to find you and listen to your podcast, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on various podcasts on the way this. So I've got the TARDIS Crew, a Doctor Who podcast I host with my son Ben. I'm also on a Dream Reform, a new Babylon 5 podcast I host with Luke Winch. And Luke and I are also doing a kind of very ad hoc podcast looking at the Lord of the Rings as well, called One Rules Them All. You can also find me on Twitter, Baz Greenland, and I'll post my podcasts. Other podcast work I do on there as well, and on my writing on the books I write, it'll be all posted on there as well. Yeah,
because you're published author now. You're published author.
Yes,
so,
I've got a book and two short stories published set in the Doctor Who universe, and all around the Lethbridge Stewart character from the original classic Doctor Who, and then I've got more stuff on the way too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, do listen to the TARDIS Crew. TARDIS Crew's pretty good. I've appeared on there a couple of times.
You have, yeah.
Yeah. I'm supporting the 11th Doctor's the best Doctor contingent. Anyway, so do follow them. And with that, we are at the end of our conversation, Baz. So I was going to say thank you ever so much for coming on to Pick a Disc.
Thank you. Always love talking Muse, as you can tell. So yeah, it's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
Giddy carousel of pop.
By 1989, I'd actually landed a job working at a fashion PR agency called Lynn Franks PR. This particular issue is memorable to me because it was our first smash hits cover for our client, Nana Cherry. They never told you if you get a cover or not. There'd always be this kind of cat and mouse. Well, we'll look at it as a great feature and we'll have to have our own shoot and we'll have to do this, and then there's quite a long period of negotiation and you never really knew if you got the cover until it came out. And I remember, when you go down and see it on the newsstand, it was a fantastic feeling. It just felt like, this is my sort of goal in extra time to win the FA Cup moment.
Chucky Vision, a Chucky podcast.
The introduction, the editorial, if you will, was written by David Campetti, and it shows real love and isn't shy about having a dig at cheap-ass, lazy film adaptations.
Yeah, Campetti is an interesting one as the co-founder of Innovation and also the editor. Yeah, a lot of his editorials are hawking other merch, hawking, the different books and stuff they're putting out, but it never felt too corporate. He has a passion in his voice that he very much is enthusiastic and enjoys that they're getting to adapt these franchises.
It does seem like he's definitely acquired Chucky because he's a fan.
Read and Buried podcast.
The theme this month was an Anne Rule book, so true crime, but not The Stranger Beside Me, which is her big book that broke the world of true crime fiction, non-fiction. True crime fiction, I just said. That's not a sentence.
Yeah.
He fell in love.
Oh.
He's so in love, but still not in love enough to stop using sex workers.
Yeah.
But in love enough to not murder them. So
Okay.
He's a romantic, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, what a man.
What a dreamy man.
But his actual name was Robert Knickerbocker.
Wow.
Which is like the best surname ever.
Do you think maybe she thought no one's going to believe this is a real name?
Well, yeah, that could have been it.
If I'm wrong, please don't correct me. I don't want to know. I want to know I'm right. Thank you.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.